What's up guys, Josh aka SavageHydraa here, and welcome to episode 8 in our how-to series, hopefully giving you everything you need to know to start building, using and just generally creating your own competitive Pokemon teams. This week's episode is on Switch Initiative, following up on last week's episode of Priority, so let's get started. First up, we're going to be looking at Momentum. Now, momentum in the game is basically who's controlling the flow of the battle. So if you are maintaining your own momentum, it generally will mean that your opponent is responding to you rather than you responding to your opponent. You want to be making proactive plays rather than reactive plays. So switching initiative is a major component in any singles format, and it's used to gain or maintain your momentum or your advantage. Momentum is essentially your advantage. You want to keep your opponent responding to you. You want to keep them acting reactively, and you're going proactive. You want yeah, that's kind of the only real way to explain it. So and there are multiple methods of switching. And there are also ways of preventing switching, so it works kind of both ways. You can preserve your momentum by forcing them to stay in, literally forcing them to stay in. There are certain things that you can do to actually do that, and then there's other ways to switch properly, and in certain situations some types of switching might be better than others depending on how you want to work it. So first of all, we'll look at hard switching. And this generally requires the most prediction because you're going to have it's more of a reactive stance in your switching because you're basically predicting what your opponent's going to do and switching accordingly to that. And this is basically when you just literally retrieve something from battle and send something else in. No moves or anything involved, just trading out Pokemon. It has a higher risk factor than all of the other methods of switching because you're losing out on a move that turn entirely. You're not doing anything. All you're doing is trading things out into what's on the field. So you're essentially losing a turn, which is why it's not that great for preserving momentum. But at the same time, you can gain momentum with it if you do predict correctly. But it's the problem with actually successfully predicting that's unreliable about it. It's often used when you have lost momentum and you're trying to regain it, again through the predictions. And it's prevented by Shadow Tag and Arena Trap and any trapping moves like Bind, Whirlpool and Fire Spin. And it's generally the most common and fastest form of switching because any hard switching that happens will happen at the very beginning of the turn, before any moves are taken into account or anything like that. So the next part we'll look at is aggressive switching. So these are going to be moves that deal damage and then switch out. So you've got U-Turn, which is a bug move, base 70 power, and Volt Switch, which is an electric move with base 70 power. So both of these will do damage, and then you will be forced to switch out. These are often used to maintain momentum, either predicting an opponent's switch, so that you think they're going to switch. So you use your U-Turn or Volt Switch, and then you can then bring out something afterwards, after you've dealt a bit of chip damage, to bring out to counter what they've just switched in. So it's a good way of keeping momentum and gaining momentum as well if you've got a good pivot. It's not prevented unless the move actually misses, which it shouldn't do in Smogon formats because of evasion clauses and stuff, but it might miss in VGC if things are using evasion boosts. And it also doesn't work if the target is immune. For example, ground type is immune to Volt Switch, so you're not going to be able to switch then. Or whether they use something like Protect or Detect. If the move doesn't actually succeed in dealing the damage, then the move is the switching component of the move is also nullified. And it has uses for both fast and slow switching. So fast switching is going to be, oh dear, they've brought something in that's not good for what I've got on the field, but I'm faster. Volt switch or U-turn, do a bit of chip damage, and then bring in something to counter what they've got on the field right now. And slow switching has the benefit of, oh, they don't like what I've got on the field, so they're going to switch into something. So I'm going to volt switch or U-turn and then switch out to something that's it's still not good for what they're going to bring out on the field, because then you can react to what they've got put on the field that turn and bring out something to preserve your momentum and force them to keep responding to you. So now we move on to utility switching. There are a few moves here. You got Baton Pass, which switches out and passes on bonus effects such as stat boosts and substitutes. So your Quiver Dances, your Agilities, your Swords Dances is a good way of helping to set up allied Pokemon that don't have the ability to set up themselves. For example, a Ninjask could pass on speed boosts and substitute, or some Swords Dances or something like that. And it's most often used for giving an ally some beneficial stat boosts. So, for example, the Ninjask that I just mentioned. It's only prevented if that user is taunted. So, switching moves such as the Volt Switch and U-turn and Baton Pass, they actually bypass Shadow Tag and Arena Trap and all that sort of thing. So it's only prevented if the user is taunted. So because it's not a damage move, so taunt means that Baton Pass can't be used. That's one thing that's good about U-turn and Volt Switch, is that they also bypass Shadow Tag and Arena Trap, and are also unaffected by taunt. It also has applications in slow switching. For example, Sylveon and Vaporeon are pretty slow, so you can tank a hit from whatever they've got on the field, and then Baton Pass and switch something out. This is good, for example, if you've just sent up a Wish. So you've got a Wish up in the air, ready to come down on something, and then you take a hit, tank a hit with the Sylveon or Vaporeon, and then use Baton Pass and switch out, so what's brought in doesn't take too much damage, and then the Wish comes down and brings it back up to full health. So it's good for preventing something that you want to heal, but it's already severely damaged from just being purely knocked out when it switches in. Parting Shot is another utility switching move. It reduces the opponent's stats when switched out. I believe it's -2. It's either I think it's -1 attack and special attack, or it might be -2 in one of those stats. I'm not entirely sure. But it is a move that is unique to Pancham and Pangoro. I'm not sure whether it's just yeah, it's exclusive just to Pangoro. So that's something that's pretty unique. I don't think it's that competitively viable, really. But it's something that exists, so I mean, you might decide you want to use it at some point. But so just so you know that it's out there it is. So now we move on to preventing switching. So this is a slightly different aspect to it. So how can you maintain your momentum by stopping your opponent from switching? Shadow Tag, as I said, prevents anything that's not a ghost type from switching. So things like Gengar, Bayonet, things like that, they'll all still be able to switch out, but anything that's not a ghost type, Shadow Tag means that it's going to be trapped in. For example, Choice Scarf Gothitelle is a particularly renowned set for dealing with supports. So a support might not be running a Shed Shell. I'll talk about Shed Shell in a minute. So you bring in your Gothitelle, which is Shadow Tagged. So it traps the support, and then you trick Choice Scarf the support, so they can't do anything really to properly counter it. It completely disables the support. For example, a Clefable or a Chansey or a Blissey or something like that. So they're basically then forced to either lock themselves into Soft Boiled or Seismic Toss or Moonblast or something like that. And then because they're trapped and they're not going to be able to do much damage to you, you can sit there, set up like +6/+6 in Calm Minds, and then just sweep an entire team. So that's kind of one thing that you can do to completely turn the tide of a battle. Arena Trap prevents any grounded opponents from switching, so anything with Levitate or is a flying type is protected from Arena Trap. Arena Trap won't trap something that's flying or got Levitate. And then Magnet Pull is a nice ability that traps all steel types. So it exclusively traps steel types, but it's really good. For example, you can run Magnezone as a counter to Ferrothorn by giving it Magnet Pull and then Hidden Power Fire. So you trap that Ferrothorn, and then you've got Hidden Power Fire, so you can. It's 4 times effective against that Ferrothorn, and that means that essentially you've ruined that Ferrothorn. It can't switch out, so you're going to get rid of it. And as long as it's not running something like Bulldoze, it's not going to be able to touch you back, because its only move is going to be Power Whip and Gyro Ball. And with Magnezone's relatively low speed and really high defense, and the fact that it resists both of those moves, Ferrothorn's not really going to be able to do anything against a Magnezone without Bulldoze. So it's a good way of countering things like that. It's another reason why Magnezone is actually a pretty good check to Bisharp, because it can trap Bisharp, and although Bisharp has more coverage against Magnezone with Steel no longer resisting Dark, and also having access to, I believe, it's got Brick Break, I know that much, but it also might be carrying Low Kick. It's something that could actually potentially knock out Magnezone. But at the same time, if you play it right, you can take out the Bisharp with your Magnezone by trapping it in that way. Mean Look, Block, Fairy Lock, and any binding moves prevent switching, but they have no real competitive battle application. They're not really used, and they're not that useful. So they're there and they exist, but they're more used in game for, say, catching roaming legendaries, like in the older games, the Eon duo, because they used to run around the map. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, they don't. You handed them on a platter, so that's a bit meh. But yeah, so they're good for preventing things from escaping, but there's no real competitive application for those moves. Pursuit is an indirect way of preventing switching. Pursuit is a base power forcey move, but it doubles in its power to an opponent that is switching out, and that includes switching moves. So if you move after they switch, so either if they hard switch or you're slower than them when they're using one of the switching moves, Pursuit will activate as they switch and deal an incredible amount of damage. So it's a really good incentive when they know that you're running Pursuit. It's a really good incentive to not switch, because they're probably going to be taken out by the Pursuit if they do it wrong. And to Shed Shell, as I said before, is an item that prevents trapping effects. So when something would be trapped by one of these effects, Shed Shell prevents it. It doesn't prevent Pursuit damage, but all of the other things, it allows them to switch out of what would normally trap them. So, for example, in draft formats that a lot of people enjoy playing, people might put a Shed Shell on one of their supports when an opponent has a Shadow Tank Pokemon, because it can allow them to switch out and stop their support getting Choice Scarred by the Gothitelle, for example. And Suction Cups is an ability that prevents forced switching, which is really nice. I think that's pretty much exclusive to Lileep and Cradily, but they'll mostly be carrying Storm Drain, and then also to the Inkay and Malamar line, but they more often than not will use Contrary. Suction Cups, again, is not something that has really any competitive viability. So we move on to the final bit now on phasing. So phasing is basically where you force switching directly, so you're forcing your opponent to switch directly, not as in they're responding to you by switching themselves, you're making them switch. All of these moves have negative priority, so that was in last week's video, number 7, so you can check that out. Roar and Whirlwind deal no damage, but they both go through substitutes, so phasing is a very good way of preventing setup, because if they're sat there setting up, you can Roar or Whirlwind them out, they lose their stat boosts and their substitutes, and then you're back at square one. They're back at square one, so it's a good way of setting back setups. Circle Throw and Dragon Tail deal damage and then force the switch, but they have 90 accuracy and don't go through substitutes, so it's a trade-off on what you want to do and what the move pool or the Pokemon you're using as a phaser actually allows. And then, as I said, these are good for crippling setup sweepers, as it removes their stat boost and their substitutes if it's Roar or Whirlwind. And these are also really good in conjunction with entry hazards, because they'll bring something in, or they'll be baton passing something out and doing that sort of thing. And then they've come in, so they're taking a bit of chip damage from coming into the battle with the entry hazards, and then you're forcing them out again, so they lose their stat boosts, and then you bring something out, and that takes further entry hazard damage. So it's really, really good in continually chipping away at your opponent. Red card is an item that you can use. It forces switching when an opponent makes contact. It's a single-use item, but this is really good. For example, I have a friend that's particularly fond of red card Fortress, running with counter. So with Sturdy, they bring in their Fortress. Someone might maybe say against a Darumanitan, they're going to use a Flare Blitz. That takes the Fortress down to 1 HP. The red card forces a switch. They bring in something else. You use counter, and it's pretty much, with the amount of damage that you've just taken, counter was pretty much all but guaranteed to take out whatever comes in from the red card. It's a random switch, much like, that's something I should say, Roar, Whirlwind, Circle Throat, and Dragon Tail, and the red card. All of these things, what they bring in isn't a choice of the opponent. It is random. It brings in whatever. They don't know what it brings in. So this is really good. That's a really nice niche sort of strategy that you can use. He's very, very fond of it. And it's quite funny when he pulls it off, because it's not even, people don't expect it, so it's actually, you'd be surprised at how easy it is to do. But yeah, that's it for Switch Initiative. So this is basically a video on how you can kind of keep your momentum in battle and keep your advantage and keep your opponent responding to you. If you found stuff in this video useful, then do leave a like, and if you want to see more of these videos, then do subscribe as well. If you think there's anything that I've missed, or anything that I can cover in future videos as well, or anything to improve in this series in general, please do leave those stuff down in the comment section below. I'll be sure to chase stuff up. And otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.